Welcome to Personal, the podcast where we get to know the real person behind the professional. I'm really glad to be chatting to Mark Deeks today. Mark is a speaker, teacher and performer. Mark, what happened at the 20-week scan of your first daughter, Laurie?
I guess you could probably categorise it as the news that every new parent dreads. We were told that Laurie had 2 terminal conditions, one of which was dangerous to my wife, Angela. And we were basically sort of shepherded into another room. It was basically, it went from everything was tickety-boo and neither of us had ever been through a 20-week scan before, so we didn't know what the sort of norm was, like you don't. We were told everything was, we'd said we didn't want to know the gender, and we wanted it to be a surprise. And so that's always the question that they ask you. And so they can sort of tell you to look away from the screen at certain points. And everything was fine. They start at the head, they start working their way down. And her issues were sort of waist down primarily. And so we just sort of noticed that the sonographer had gone a bit quiet and she seems not to be chatting anymore. And then without any warning whatsoever, she just said, I'm duty bound to tell you I found a problem. And that was obviously an ultimately jarring moment. And she was determined that she wanted to tell us the gender. She basically said, if I can tell you the gender, I know you don't want to know, but if I can tell you, I might be able to explain what I found and sort of put your mind at rest. So obviously we had no idea what she was talking about. We'd long since decided we didn't want to know. So now we were being sort of pretty shoehorned into finding out on the spot with my wife lying on the bed. So we sort of looked at each other and said, right, okay, tell us. And so it became apparent that it was because she thought the condition that she'd found would resolve itself after birth if it was a girl. And because she could see it was a girl, and we now were finding out it was a girl, she's like, I think it's this, but, we'd want to investigate further. But it may, if it is this, then it may be okay, but we need to sort of investigate. So that was obviously quite a lot to take in a moment. So we were basically said that they needed to get another scan a few days later, but if it was going to be what they thought, it might not be great news. So yeah, sure enough, within a few days, another scan with a specialist, and yeah, bad news, two terminal conditions. One, and it wasn't what the initial sonographer had thought, because that potentially would have been okay. So yeah, two bad pieces of news, and now we recommend what's known as a termination for medical reasons. And of course, we didn't really know what they were saying. In fact, they didn't use the term at first, I don't think. I mean, a lot of it's still quite sort of a blur. But Angela remembers that she gathered what they were saying quicker than I did. I guess it was sort of like women's intuition, or it's her body. She sort of understood the mechanics of what they were saying, and I wasn't really quite processing. I thought it was bad news, but you're having the child anyway, kind of thing. Whereas then when they started talking about termination and the sort of penny dropped, then it was the questioning then sort of turned to, how do you want it done? And then it became very medical and scientific. And it was only then that I realized, sort of absorbed what they were saying. And it basically transpired that the decision was not really, there were 2 stages. Legally, it's the parent's decision at that point, which is a bit of a weird thing. I've always sort of compared it afterwards to if an adult gets a terminal diagnosis, they don't get asked to sort of sign a piece of paper to say, yeah, that's okay. You get just told this is it, and then the person can sort of internally or within the confines of their family decide whether to, I'm going to fight it and show them, kind of thing. But in this kind of scenario, it's the parent's legal decision, even though you've been given this sort of medical diagnosis, which is really bleak. So the 2 decisions are then, firstly, do you want to go ahead with the termination? Well, no, but you've told us this. And secondly, like literally the mechanics of how do you want to do that, because of where the lady is in the pregnancy. So there are all kinds of legalities around how many weeks she is. It turned out that only I think they said 3 surgeons in the entire Northeast are happy to do surgery until 22 weeks. But once it passes 22 weeks, now it's like, no, you have to give birth. So Angela was going to be 21 weeks and 5 days. So she had the choice. And, I fully, I said, I support you no matter what you decide, but that's not much of a choice. And so she was told, she could have surgery if she wanted it. And she just decided that she couldn't bring herself to give birth knowing what was going on. So that's what we did. So, yeah, it's known as a termination for medical reasons, but it's a peculiar set of circumstances. And they very quickly sort of say, what kind of funeral do you want? I'm like, well, how many kinds of funeral are there? I mean, like, so it's a really strange scenario that happens very, very quickly over the course of hours and days.
From joy and hope to suddenly
from
despair.
halfway through a 20-week scan and, oh, yes, her head looks amazing, God, look at that heart, etc. And then jarring halt. So, very quickly Angela was in surgery.
Yeah, and it's got that acronym, hasn't it? TFMR, termination for medical reason. It just makes it sound so blasé, so simple.
Yeah, we found the language around it is the biggest challenge. And that what is... Because, the term termination, the term abortion, these terms have such emotive, powerful meanings for people and create very, very distinct and jarring viewpoints from legal points of view, from religious points of view, moral points of view. And you very much are sort of caught in this sort of crosshairs of like, you can't win no matter where you turn. We found that even within the what is known as the baby loss community, there is a certain awkwardness still around that sort of subset of the community. People are, no one's happy to talk about miscarriage or stillbirth and all these awful variations of the situation. But even within that community, TFMR is still not spoken about.
I agree.
And even when you turn up we've been to baby loss community events and memorial events and commemorations and so on, where there've been banners, like roller banners from the charities, and TFMR is not mentioned. It's down as fetal abnormalities, which just sounds really cold and emotionless as well. So, we found that the sort of the wording and the language that gets used, and I understand from the doctor's point of view, they're dealing with which something to them is very medical, and it is, but it's the most deeply personal medical scenario, and it's very difficult for anyone to know what to say in that scenario.
Absolutely. And how did you move forward? Talk me through, if you can, that point up to where you decide to progress with surgery from there.
Well, like I say, within a few days, Angela was booked in for surgery because with the legal ramifications of the 22-week boundary needed to be swift. Within 10 days, the UK was in lockdown. So that was, after it happened. But, very quickly, everything was coming at us from all angles. I think the process was brutal for Angela, obviously physically and emotionally. It was certainly brutal to watch. And it was weird. We found that the staff was so within the sort of confines of the ward, very, very caring and understanding, and they're around this stuff all the time, which must be a really traumatic job to have. But I think that when you've clearly never been through that, and I also, I've said this many times, clearly the female is the centre of this process and should be getting the majority of the attention. I have zero problem with that. It's right. It's a very strange process to go through as a man, because not only are you sort of emotionally invested in the scenario, but you have no medical knowledge and no female intuition knowledge. Let's face it, the average bloke has no mechanical or understanding of the ramifications of decisions within that kind of setting, because we don't, it sounds stupid to say, we don't even have the body parts, right? So we've got no idea what they're saying. Or we can do surgery like this, or we can use injections like that. And I'm just sat there going, I don't understand anything you're saying to me, because I have no starting point in this conversation, no context. So, just the notion of onsetting labour with injections, and I mean, it's just, you almost like, I'm not very good. I'm quite an emotional character, and so I tried to sort of like be staying calm for Angela's sake, and telling her for the billionth time everything was going to be all right. But I didn't understand what was going on, so it didn't feel disingenuous to say it, but you know what I mean? Like, I didn't feel like I was lying to her, because I would never lie to her, but I hadn't the faintest idea what was happening. And so you're trying to sort of detach yourself from the emotion of the situation, which is impossible, and reassure someone. But it's empty words, because you've got no idea what's going on. It's a very strange scenario to be in for a man.
Yeah, definitely. And then the process of recovery afterwards, I guess physically and emotionally for Angela, but then emotionally for you both afterwards. How did that begin?
Well, like I say, lockdown. So, my Angela's parents, my in-laws, live at the other end of the same big housing estate they were on, so within minutes of walk. But of course, no one was allowed to see anyone, etc. So there was that very much sort of, I think for Angela, very much sort of so near but so far kind of scenario. I can't even go and hug my mum.
Oh, brutal.
And even when it got to sort of, you're allowed to see them from a distance down the other end of the path, kind of nonsense that was going on, it was very, very challenging for Angela. Filter into that, she couldn't work because of what industry she worked in. So she was just rattling around the house going for ever longer dog walks when the dog had never seen so many walks. Meanwhile, I'm sat at home trying to, I was lucky that some of my stuff can be done online anyway, and was already online, but trying to work out the rest of it, because thousands and thousands of pounds of work had just disappeared. And now it was a case of, right, I have to go into practicality mode to make this work, because you can't work. I'm finding it difficult to work, but simply have to. So I think that, we were getting sort of what was referred to as counselling over the phone, because no one was allowed to go anywhere to see anyone. There was also the practicalities of like genetic investigations about whether the conditions were going to be genetic, would it happen again, and all that kind of stuff. And again, you're sort of having consultations with these sort of high experts from the genealogy or genetics or whatever departments. Again, not really with any understanding of what they're saying. So, and it's just me and her sort of in the house trying to process what anyone was saying to us. And I guess, it's not like a woe is us situation in terms of like, when you're around this stuff, you realize how many millions of people go through this stuff every day. It's extraordinary. When you go to the sort of baby memorials, baby loss memorial events, and they read out the names of children who've been lost, and some families are up to 5, and like it's unimaginable. I've said to Angela before, I can't believe anyone has a baby. When you hear of the number of things that can go wrong, it's extraordinary. The odds that are against you almost.
Yeah.
It was certainly a tough period for those first few weeks and months whilst we tried to figure out what was going on. We weren't allowed to go to the memorial service. So the Newcastle Council or Health Service have a monthly memorial service for every child that's been lost in the region in the last month. We weren't allowed to go to that. I'll never forget, they emailed us and said, sorry that you can't come. Would you like us to email you a running order of the service? And I was like, no, I don't think that's very good. You're not emailing me a PDF to sort of memorialise my child kind of thing. So I strongly requested that they film it and send people like a video of it. And they did. But when the video arrived, they said, look, really sorry. We realise we've said that no one was allowed to come, and here's your film of it. But don't be upset if there's the noise of children in the background, because one family just rocked up anyway and we couldn't stop them coming in with their kids. Right. So we could just hear the sound of kids running around whilst we're watching the service of our child being lost. So I was like, I was pretty annoyed at that. So I was like, look, all of us could have just rocked up. So you either stop everyone coming in because no one's allowed in. You don't just allow a family in with kids. That's just heartless.
Yeah.
And of course, that was around the same time that Dominic Cummings was driving to Barnard Castle and everything. So you can be sure that we were probably swearing quite a lot at that point.
Oh, I know.
But it was a tough set of circumstances for sure.
Yeah, totally different. I went through miscarriages. totally different but similar, and it was all around that same time. So I can relate to a lot of things, going into scans and being told that there was no heartbeat anymore, things like that, but on your own. And it was just all, it made things very tough, especially compacted with all the stress, because again, lost lots of business overnight, wasn't sure what was happening there. But I guess, could you say that perhaps spending more time together helped you get through it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that, we've always been close. We've always talked about things, and Angela, like, in many ways, to her credit, is a very practical person. When faced with a difficult situation, she goes into a practical mode and deals with emotions later, which obviously sometimes is not the best, but I understood why she was doing it. And I mean, she still deals with the ramifications now, as we both do. We just realized this morning that today is must be the third anniversary of us. We now have a daughter. So today is apparently the anniversary of when we told the world on Facebook. This kind of stupid thing.
Yeah.
So we told the world that we were having a baby, and so there was a picture of our dog with a rainbow and a scan that we sort of used to.
Oh, nice.
But just weird that these things still remind us of sort of what might have been kind of scenario. Or I don't think you ever. I think it's when people ask you questions. He says being interviewed on a podcast, but when not this kind of question, but when the kind of more everyday questions. So when someone says, "How many kids have you got?"
Yeah.
Or is she your first? Or those kind of sort of practical, small talk questions.
How do you answer those?
I never know how to answer it. It's what's weird is somebody the other day put in writing, "I'm the father of two beautiful daughters." And I found that difficult because that's the first time anyone's done it the other way.
Right.
And I almost went, it sounds awful to say it, right? It's because I never met Laurie. So I've got, the sort of, what did she look like kind of thing. Father of two beautiful daughters. I'm not sure, are you placed to say that my daughter was a beautiful daughter? I don't know. My brain just started having all these weird thought processes that, as I say, people go through these things all the time. Like my mom had 3 miscarriages. And I was like the third of 4 attempts. So, and that has definitely impacted her life. It's like she still talks about it now.
Yeah.
And she's in her 70s now. And so it's such a deep running subject that people never get over, people never know how to deal with. The language around it is clunky at best.
Yeah.
And so that's why I try and have these conversations as much as I can. Even though none of this is enjoyable.
No.
But if no one talks about it, then we don't get anywhere. And particularly being the sort of male voice in the scenario.
Absolutely.
There aren't many that I've seen, men who are comfortable talking about this. And by the way, I'm not comfortable, but I sort of go into practical mode for this stuff. That I think that there was one guy I came into contact with on LinkedIn of all places who'd been through a similar scenario like 25 years earlier. And he was talking about how when he was walking into the ward with his wife in pain and knowing that what they were about to have to go through, someone passed them in the corridor and said, "Oh, it'll be over soon," kind of thing. And like, "Oh, it'll all be worth it." Yeah, not knowing that she was walking in to have a termination.
Yeah.
And I was like, this kind of stuff just hasn't changed in decades. All these conversations are still happening. No one knows how to deal with it. Even to the point where when we were then having a pregnancy after having lost Laurie, now we were in the midst of pure pandemic, nobody's allowed anywhere kind of scenario, going for scans on that pregnancy after loss, the hospital have what they call a rainbow clinic, which is a beautiful concept where they know that everyone who comes for a scan on a Wednesday afternoon has previously lost a child. So we're in, like, you would think, prime bedside manner mode, because there's this conscious effort, right, we're going to look after these people, particularly on a Wednesday afternoon, because of what they've previously gone through. But it was then, can your husband wait in the cafe downstairs whilst you have your scan? No, he can't. Because you might remember, this is your rainbow clinic. So absolutely not. Oh, well, can he at least wait down the corridor? No, he's coming in. okay, well, he has to wait down the corridor whilst you wait. And then when it's time for you to come in, he can come in. So I'm not allowed to wait in the waiting room, but I can go in the scan, which just makes no sense whatsoever.
Crazy.
And then when we got into the scan, having the woman insisting that she had to start the scan, even though I wasn't in the room yet, because Angela was trying to phone me, like, I'm not starting until Mark's in the room. There was, I would just lie there and we'll just sort of get you sorted. And effectively, we were starting the scan without me being in the room, and Angela was having a meltdown. When I got in and sat down, they'd drawn like this yellow tape around my chair, the chair that was at the side of the bed, of how far towards the bed I could be. And I couldn't quite reach to hold her hand. So I literally like just shook my chair an inch. And the woman's like, back. I'm like, give me a break. You were in a mask. She's in a mask. I'm in a mask. There's probably 5 vaccines in this room. I'm going to hold my wife's hand, and this is the Rainbow Clinic, like on your bike.
Madness.
So there was just extraordinary pressures going on at the time.
It's just, it's hard to believe now, isn't it, that was
absolutely.
the situation.
Even down to the poor, I felt so sorry for pregnant women at the time, because there was huge debate. I mean, I'm not here to have a COVID vaccine debate whatsoever, but there was huge debate as to whether it was safe for pregnant women to have a vaccine. Mm-hmm. And the advice on that almost changed overnight.
Yeah.
It went from absolutely not, you should absolutely not do it, and go, why haven't you had your COVID vaccine? Mm-hmm. Mid-pregnancy. She was like 5 or 6 months pregnant when they changed it.
Yeah, same.
And then starting to get grilled by the staff every time we went into the hospital for a checkup. I see here you haven't had a vaccine. Why is that? And like, for right or for wrong, like, we can debate that for the rest of the time. But that's an awful situation to put a pregnant woman in.
Massive, yeah. And I remember going through it thinking, well, should I? And then all of a sudden there was a lot of pressure saying that you were 3 times likely to die if you caught COVID with being pregnant. Yeah. And you think, goodness, well, what do I do? And so
for a lady who has previously lost a child.
Yeah, and again, similar
like
situation.
How many hours do you reckon we had debating that?
Well, I had the vaccine, and I don't actually think it was caused by it, but I had a miscarriage afterwards. But then when they were speaking to me, they did say, oh, did you have the COVID vaccine? And I was like, yes. And it went in the notes. So you do then just wonder.
Yeah.
So, it was very
I mean, that's going to be literally debated for the rest of the time, isn't it? But...
And then there was this research afterwards, after my second daughter was born, that actually there was potential damage if they had the vaccine. I was like, well, she's born now, and you just almost have to wait and see what the impact of it is.
I think that there was so much going on that was on a mass human scale that the practical day-to-day things that would have been otherwise inconsequential on an average year were almost forgotten about. Mm-hmm. Those kind of decisions weren't talked about.
And in some respects, there were people dying. There were a lot of people dying, and you understand why there's so many pressures that they have and priorities.
Of course.
But when you are that individual and you're going through that, and you've been through horrendous situations,
you just felt like you were tossing a coin. Like, what do you do?
Yeah, it's almost like we are now research.
Exactly that.
Yeah. Exactly
that. And if you can change your mind on it so quickly, then I don't think you know.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Like you say, a whole other debate. I mean, did you struggle with getting your head around the fact of what had happened to Laurie? Because the reason I asked that is because and I know there were miscarriages, that one was at 12 weeks, one was slightly earlier, but certainly the first, they had a heartbeat, so they were alive, but they hadn't been born, so that they had no birth, they had no birthday. So therefore, how did they die? And I really struggled with getting my head around that when I was trying to grieve and mourn the loss of my baby. Mm-hmm. Did you feel anything similar?
I think language, again, plays a part in, is the day that we lost her birthday. Mm. When it got to like the first, is it an anniversary?
Yeah.
Is she now 1? Like, you don't know what language to use around it. So, 4th of March was the day that we lost her. Is that now technically the day she was born as well? No, because she wasn't technically born. I mean, it's a very, very strange thing to wrap your head around. And I mean, we still, every 4th of March, we go to the beach where we live, and we just write her name on a stone and put it in the water and just let the water sort of take it away. And that's the kind of way we sort of try and memorialize it. But again, clunky language at best. Mm.
And so do you think if we're talking about it, and by the way, I'm very grateful that you are, and especially as a man, do you think talking about is the solution around that language issue?
I don't think there's an alternative. because, like I say, when you're around this scenario and you realize just how many people are going through this, that's an awful lot of people to not be talking about and to be bottling it up inside, and for people not to be, I sometimes sort of roll my eyes a bit at the term raise awareness, because, how many more millions of subjects do we need to raise awareness about? It's just talking about it, isn't it? And I think that we're in a scenario where huge portions of society have been through this. Yeah, I don't remember anyone ever speaking to me about it unless I'm in this kind of scenario.
Yeah, same. And you mentioned about the scan as well, and scanxiety.
Absolutely.
Again, I'd never heard anyone talk about that until you've experienced something like that. It was almost like an exciting thing until you've experienced that, and then it's so real, the anxiety you face.
Yeah, I mean, pregnancy after loss
Yeah.
is utterly brutal. Like, you cannot enjoy it.
No, it takes away all the joy.
Yeah, it's like I say, I'm the kind of person who sort of likes to try and be informed. So when they're handing out the leaflets, like, this is the scan you can expect here, this is what we're going to test for at this stage, this is what we're going to test for this stage. I found it overwhelming, but I was like, just tell me the next one. Tell me the next one all the time. Right, at 10 weeks, we should be having this should be happening at 12 weeks, this, blah, blah, blah. I can't take on all of this information for the next 40 weeks. I just need to know the next stage. And that was even with the first one. So when it came to the second one, having now sort of seen a bit of this, there are so many things that can go wrong. And I think Angela in particular, she, I guess, of the age where friends are having children semi-regularly. And, I guess it's the perception of social media as well. It looks like someone's just like easily had a child, easily, whatever that means.
Oh, yeah.
Look at her, like, she's, she's just casually had a third one.
Oh, no, I can relate
and of course,
to that.
it's not casually at all.
No,
but the
but it
perception as
seems
the
to be.
outsider is like, look, they've just had it easy, like, and why this us?
And do you know what? Some people do have it easy, and that's fine as well. But yeah, I found that hard to see.
That can be difficult, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And how did you get through those 39, 40, however many weeks it was?
I mean, very much one step at a time. The hospital agreed to give us extra scans to put our mind at rest. So certainly during the second half of the pregnancy, we were having lots of scans. I don't know how many scans we had in the end, but it was significantly more than normal.
Yeah.
Like I say, we went through the whole vaccine question. It was just a case of like, tick the days off, tick the weeks off. And then when it got to within shouting distance, it was almost just like, I almost don't care when because I didn't know the gender again. Yeah. So I just get the child here somehow, and under any circumstances, just let this child be born.
Yeah.
Because like the pressures. Yeah.
You almost daren't buy anything in the run up, and you daren't even count that they're here until you hold them in your arms. And even then, you're like, oh my goodness.
Because we just bought the pram for Laurie when we lost her.
Oh my goodness.
And that had to get sent back. We never even saw it. It got delivered to our in-laws, and then we had to sort of argue with the images as whether they were going to take it out. John Lewis, as I have to call them these days. So, yeah, I mean, it was, very much like, do we dare buy anything? But then it sort of gets so close, like you just have to.
Yeah, and then it's a panic.
You have to take a chance and sort of start getting nurseries and cots and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, that was as anxious as it comes.
Yeah.
It's particularly then the literal sort of labour, because that went on a long time. Poor Angela was like labour like 72 hours or something. It was, get this over, please.
And again, you hear of so many things that can go wrong in that stage as well.
Yeah, I mean, Angela was remarkably calm for 80% of it. And then when it got to the end, that was really fractious, because they were obviously like monitoring the child's heart rate, and when she had contractions, the heart rate started to drop. And obviously, even if I think, it's all a bit of a blur, but I think like one of the sort of midwives or someone muttered it under their breath, just sort of quietly, and Angela heard it. And now it's a discussion. We're just going to get a consultant to come and have a look.
Yeah.
And then that's just quickly went from 0 to 100 in seconds.
Yeah.
And, that was real panic stations. And I remember just sort of like shouting in her face, like, look at me, I don't want you to look anywhere else, kind of thing.
Yeah.
I'm like, here, look at me, nothing else is happening. But yeah, they ended up a forceps delivering, got her out.
I had forceps for my first as well.
But yeah, I was adamant it was a boy, and then it was a girl. So I was actually delighted.
Yeah, Nola, I believe.
Nola, yeah.
Yeah. And how did you feel when you held her in your arms?
It's just indescribable. Like I say, I was convinced it was a boy. Like, even because I'm super squeamish, that the notion of seeing anything involved in this process was more than I could cope with. So, like, there was definite possibilities that it was going to be me that passed out first. So it was very much a case of when I was telling her to look at me, that was for me as well. I don't want to see anything either. But when they handed Nola over, I still thought she was a boy because I didn't know what I was looking at. But yeah, and they said it was a girl, and I think the first word I said was no.
Nola.
No, we didn't know she was. Well, we did. I think we knew that name in advance, but yeah, it was wild.
Yeah. Did it almost help heal you, that moment, or not?
Tough question. I mean, unquestionably, it's better to have her. I don't think you ever, sometimes you're just sort of wondering, because Nola is a very sort of, you can tell straight away, she's a very sort of empathetic, sort of sympathetic character. She's very caring. She would have made a great sister, like a great little sister kind of thing. Like, so I think the hardest thing that we've dealt with is that if what had happened with Laurie hadn't happened, Nola wouldn't exist.
Yeah.
And that's unimaginable. Because there's no way we would have a second child, possibly ever, but certainly that quickly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so the notion of Nola not existing as a result of that is just, you can't process that.
Yeah.
And I didn't really clock that moment until we took Nola on the anniversary of us losing Laurie to the beach with us to put the stone in the water. And that was just emotional wreckage, because it's like, you literally would not be here if this hadn't happened. And that's a really peculiar emotional collision.
Mm-hmm. I can imagine. Well, yeah, same for my youngest. Yeah. But do you believe in kind of souls, and do you believe that perhaps Nola and Laurie are the same soul?
That's not a path I go down. I think that Angela's much more a sort of spiritual, something out there kind of person than I am. I would consider myself an atheist. I don't really have any spiritual beliefs at all. But there have been one or two sort of unusual moments. Like, obviously, I'm in tune to music-related stuff, so we would decide we were going to run the Great North Run for one of the baby loss charities that had supported us. And Angela Besser had such a rough time giving birth to Nola that she wasn't allowed to run, and still is suffering physically and mentally from giving birth.
Yeah, that's a whole other subject, isn't it?
Is it not? So she had to, wasn't allowed to exercise for a long period of time. So anyway, long story short, I ended up running the Great North Run for the both of us.
Right. So you did it twice?
Well, I did not. So because I don't like running, and I have to have music to distract me from the suffering, I'm normally, under 99% of the circumstances, an album person. So I will listen to an album or even a discography from start to finish. Right. I never make playlists and put shuffle on. Shuffle is like the enemy to my brain. Yeah, because I don't want anything else, let alone a computer deciding what I'm going to listen to next. So, but because I knew I was going to run this on my own, I was like, I'm just going to need anything to distract my brain. I put a playlist together of music, and on the start line hit shuffle, and there was about 6 hours worth of music on this playlist, so way more than I needed. And I'm sure we'll end up talking about it, but the piece of music that I wrote in sort of connecting Laurie to music for me started playing as I was approaching the finish line, and I'm like suffering because I'm no athlete, and that was sort of her music was sort of playing as I crossed the finish line. It was the only track that was related to her out with this 6-hour playlist, but 2.5 hours later, sure enough, bang, there it was. And I was
That's
like,
crazy. That's giving me goose
yeah,
pimples.
that was a bit weird.
Yeah, because I was going to say, have you felt any spiritual connection to Laurie since?
I mean, it's always connected with music.
Yeah.
Because of how much that's part of my life and how much I've sort of used music to sort of try and process what we went through. Yeah, I mean, the other music related story is that our first dance at our wedding was the song that was playing in the hospital when we found out we were losing Laurie. And of all of the billions of songs that could have been, it was just ridiculous.
Yeah.
And so that song then really sort of took on a different slant. And I think that song and the song that I wrote, the melody that I wrote in sort of tribute to Laurie, that's definitely when there's some sort of connection. But it catches you off guard, you know. You can just be walking the dog and looking at the sea, and the next thing you know, you've got a tear in your eye kind of thing for no apparent reason. And yeah, it can catch you off guard.
And the song was Nothing's Gonna Stop Us Now, as your wedding song, and you took that whole take on it that you were still going to keep trying.
Yeah, I mean, it took us a while to get to that position, but yeah, it became sort of defiance. It's very strange when the happiest moment in your life song becomes the worst moment in your life song.
Yes, I can relate.
And that's, what else can you do but try and sort of pick your way through it?
Yeah, so I've got a strange thing that just happened to me over the last 2 days with music.
Okay.
So I'm doing a lot of journaling at the minute, and I sometimes write the song that's perhaps been going around in my head that day, that's perhaps pertinent to the situation. So I think it was Friday night, I did my journaling, wrote the song. Saturday morning, came down, making breakfast for my girls, turn on the TV, it's on a music channel automatically. It played the song that I'd written last night. And I thought, oh, that's strange, that's a bit of a coincidence. Never mind, it's a nice song, let's listen. Saturday, did the same thing, wrote in the journal, wrote the song. Sunday morning, came, turned the TV on, that song. So it happens twice. Now, it didn't happen this morning. Yeah. And I almost was dying to turn the TV on, but I think I was trying too hard. But I was just like, what's that about? That's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, music, I guess that I've always been the kind of person who sort of just goes, well, that's just random, isn't it? I mean, it could be anything. But I think sometimes I don't know, it depends on what kind of person you are. Like sometimes people like to look for these things, like look for these connections. You can't argue with that. It has happened. And I'm very much of a mind to sort of say, like, interpret it how you wish, and if that gives you comfort, great. And it's kind of the same way I treat religion. I don't subscribe to any religion, but if religion gives you comfort and it's not doing anyone else any harm, then fine. I come from a very religious family, so I'm used to being around the notion of people. I don't want to say seeing things that aren't there, because I try to be as respectful as I can around religion, but seeing things that aren't there. And so I find it that the individual interpretation of something, and this is kind of how I approach music, your individual interpretation of a song or a band or music that you like is absolutely fine. It is completely random. Like, we could stand here now and passionately agree on 10 bands and passionately disagree on the 11th because of the randomness. And when we talk about foods that we like, we're completely comfortable with the idea that it's just random. What, you don't like red peppers? How can you not like red peppers? But when it comes to music, people get so impassioned about it because it means something to them, that the notion that someone could see a band that they don't like as something that they do and vice versa almost becomes alien to us. I think that the worst band ever is the Beautiful South. I just would love to rid the world of their existence. Not as people, I've got nothing against those people, but their music just shouldn't be. There's no reason for it. I call it the musical belly button fluff. Right? No one knows why it's there. No one knows what purpose it serves. No one knows what it's doing. It's just there. Just go away.
Yeah.
We don't need you. That's how I feel about the music of the Beautiful South. But that's my feeling about it. I know that some people are deeply passionate about the Beautiful South. And that's okay. And I think that when it's something that matters to someone, be it music or religion, and obviously, some religious people will be recoiling in horror that I'm comparing it to something as theoretically inconsequential as music. But I think we're allowed to interpret things that we see in the ways that we want to interpret it. So, for example, when I did my PhD about national identity in heavy metal music, as it happens, the kind of reading a lot of old mythologies, be they Viking mythology or Anglo-Saxon poetry or whatever, my gut feel is that all of these different cultures and different parts of the world and different eras in history are all perhaps just interpreting the same things, but in different ways.
Yeah.
And they're just calling it something else. So this religion over here calls it X God, and this religion over here calls it Y God, but they just call it about the same thing. It's just man's interpretation of what man is seeing and processing. And so the notion of whether you can see something and interpret it as a spiritual thing or like a ghost or a god or whatever it is, I'm completely comfortable with someone interpreting it, but I think I'm allowed to go, that's just random.
Oh, absolutely. And why? Because we're all made of the same kind of things. We've got brains, hearts, that sort of thing physically. Why are we so diverse in our musical preferences?
Well, why? I don't understand why anyone would think we shouldn't be. So like when I do my speaking, I talk about the notion of the language of relaxing music. And one of my workshops is called How to Relax Using Music When There's No Such Thing as Relaxing Music. Because the term relaxing music gets used as if it's a genre description, as if it's a sound description. And the world constantly reinforces this. So if you put the term relaxing music into Apple Music or Spotify or YouTube, you'll just get endless sort of whale sounds and sounds of nature. And strangely on Apple Music, you get Lewis Capaldi, which I've never quite understood. So if you are relaxed by those kind of sounds that you might expect to hear in a spa, great. It certainly doesn't relax me. And it's the same as food. It's the same as TV programs. Colours. If you say to Nola, what is your favourite colour? She'll tell you it's red. I don't know why her favourite colour is red. I would never buy a red car. I don't particularly like red, but then I'm a Newcastle fan, so I tend to stay away from red things. So why is it surprising that we should not react to music in the same way? We can interpret things in completely different ways. And I don't know why that's surprising.
Yeah. I think it's the passion linked to it, like you were saying before.
But it's because it matters to us.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like, we could all think of a lyric that one of us would interpret as cheesy and one of us would interpret as emotive.
Yes.
And it's the same set of words.
Definitely.
But it's because of how the framing that we've placed upon it. So without getting too deep in it, there's a sociological concept called imagined community.
Right.
Which is what I was writing about in my PhD. And an imagined community just means if you have something in common with someone, you place a meaning on that. So, for example, we could say we're both from the northeast of England. And if I said to you, what are people like from the northeast? The stereotypical cliche is they're friendly people, we're welcoming, talk more than Southerners do, happy to sort of show someone around, give directions, just generally a more positive, open, friendly kind of people. It's not scientifically true, though, isn't it? Because there will be loads of people from the northeast who are horrible individuals who commit crimes, just like there are from anywhere else in the country. The notion that you all have the same personality and same characteristics and qualities just isn't true. But we like to believe these things. And if you all go and watch the same football game because you all support the same team, 50,000 people in that stadium have this meaning construction in their heads that this is what it means to be a fan of Newcastle or Sunderland or whatever. And within that 50,000 people, of course, there's a ginormous cross-section of society. It's the same when you go and watch a band play. 50,000 Coldplay fans all think that they share something because they love Coldplay. In reality, there'll be people who love Coldplay who are scientists, people who love Coldplay who, make sandwiches for a living. And every other cross-section of society in terms of characteristics, wealth, personality, everything. It's an entirely random thing, but we place identity constructions on top of things.
Yeah, that makes sense. So how did music help you heal from the situation that you went through?
I mean, the main thing is that my brother-in-law and sister-in-law had a star named after Laurie. And it was a surprise. The star chart arrived in the post, where the Laurie Deeks star is in the Andromeda system, and it's ornate, frameable poster, and I was writing an album at the time for my solo project, Arth, which is an old Northumbrian word, which means my native land, and all the lyrics are about Northumbrian history, which is like ridiculously niche. But again, it comes back to my PhD, National and Regional Identity in Metal. So it's a do metal project with loads of piano and choral vocals and organs and strings and cellos and about Northumbrian history. And there was never a second in my mind that thought, I need to write a song about losing a child, because my brain would just go, well, that's crass. Let's not do that. But 3 o'clock in the morning, I suddenly sat up in bed and thought, what if those star coordinates weren't star coordinates? What if those numbers were, in fact, the notes of a musical scale? What does that sound like if you play it as a melody? And what that idea did for me was many things. Primarily, here is a way that I can use music to try and process what I'm going through. But again, it came back to this idea of, if Laurie had never existed, then this melody would never have existed. Now she's just a bit more real, because now this has happened as a result of her. And when it's a child that you've never met, you sort of find yourself looking for ways to sort of almost like, did that really happen?
Yeah.
And so whilst the lyrics are about Northumbrian history, this melody that became the last melody at the end of the album, it's a musical nod to her. And all of the credits on the album sort of say in memory of Laurie Deeks and have those numbers on. If you don't know it's there, you don't know it's there. So that's fine. To the rest of the world, that's a song called Only Three Shall Know, about 3 Benedictine monks knowing where the real location of St. Cuthbert's remains are. I mean, that's literally what that song's about. But that melody in our house is Laurie's theme. And so they're the numbers on on my tattoo on my arm. I call it my heart on my sleeve. So there's a constant reminder of her. And it was just, like I say, this way of using music to sort of memorialize her existence. And that's kind of really what's led on to my work as a speaker and talking about music as a mental health tool and a well-being tool, because I knew I had to use music somehow, and I tell other people to turn to music in difficult times. But I was so busy trying to sort of process what was going on amidst a pandemic, make a living, etc., that maybe I wasn't quite taking my own musical medicine until I figured that out.
Yeah, musical medicine. That's such a good phrase. I really believe it's true. And for me, it just helps unlock so many memories as well. So powerful. I could look at a photo album, but listening to songs emotes that feeling, the really strong, powerful feelings, much more than visual memories.
Yeah, I talk about this all the time, that this music is deeply connected to memories. And I'll sort of say music is like the memory marker of our lives. Your memories are pot marked by songs, and we don't take the time to acknowledge that very often. So I was doing a workshop in a primary school a few weeks ago. So I'm looking at a room full of 8-year-old kids who you might think might not be necessarily get this concept. But I said to them, how many of you have been on a holiday or a day out before where you can remember a song being part of that memory? 80% of those kids immediately put their hands in the air.
Brilliant.
So, okay, where were you? Who was there? What was the song? What was the weather like? Let's see how much you can remember. And they were just going, oh yeah, it was sunny. My auntie was in the car. She was singing this song. We were driving to the airport. Like all of these little stories come out. But if you do it to adults, like I've done many times as well, you don't just have to talk about wedding songs and funeral songs. I've had a lady say, I was sat in this car park on a Tuesday afternoon waiting to go into X office, and for some reason I remember that song playing on the radio while I was waiting. And then, it was raining. The seemingly inconsequential moments can still become entwined in a song. And I was saying to the kids, as I always do in these workshops, you won't realize this because, you're 8 years old. These songs are absolutely fundamentally becoming part of who you are. And 50 years from now, you might still have that memory. You won't remember any other car journey with your auntie other than the one she was singing with, even though you might have sat in the car with her 50 times. Because we remember music and food. And anyone who's ever been married and is worried about what colour ribbon there should be on the chairs, inconsequential. No one is noticing the colour of the ribbons on the chairs. They're absolutely going to remember what the music of the evening do was, and they're absolutely going to remember whether they like the food. Because that's just that's human stuff. No one cares about the colour of the ribbon on it.
No.
I've seen, because I used to play a lot of weddings and events.
Oh, yes, of course.
There was a bride who was absolutely losing it because the the crease on the tablecloth on the top table wasn't the crease that she asked for. And I just remember thinking, she just doesn't get this, does she? No one cares. No one has noticed.
Yeah.
No one has even registered the possibility that there is a crease on that tablecloth, let alone the wrong crease. What's a wrong crease?
I know, I've got no idea.
But they're absolutely remembering that you walk down the aisle to X song.
Yes, absolutely. The only other thing that triggers strong memories for me is smells as well, but not as powerful as music.
No.
But on the subject of weddings, what's the most commonly played wedding song that you've done at weddings?
I mean, to be honest, in the last few years, I've stopped playing as many weddings as I used to. I used to do an awful lot of them. I just sort of do them now if anyone asks me to. But there was a certain period of time where 1,000 Years by Christina Perri was just unavoidable. And what always used to puzzle me was people used to have this notion of wedding music as a thing.
Yeah.
Like a genre description. So people would say, what's popular in wedding music land right now? Well, what song do you want to walk down the aisle to?
Yeah, that's it.
Right. Forget if anyone else in the room knows what it is. It doesn't matter. What means something to you? What reminds you of your other half? Even if it's some inconsequential B-side of some 12-inch that no one's heard from 1962, it just doesn't matter. If there's a story for why that song reminds you of that person, that's what you should come down the aisle to. Like I had one guy adamant that he wanted to walk out at the end of the wedding to the Star Wars theme.
Okay, cool.
Because he loves Star Wars. I was like, I'm here for you, mate. I absolutely love Star Wars. Brilliant. I'll make that happen for you. And she's like, you're not having Star Wars. And so the request list came in, and sure enough, Star Wars was on it. I was like, you've really staked a claim on this. Like,
awesome.
He's like, I just want one decision. I just want one thing. She can decide everything else. I want to come out with Star Wars. So I played Star Wars. He walked up the aisle. He had his fist in the air. I was like, this was his really triumphant moment. This was everything he dreamt of. And he came up to me afterwards in the drinks reception. And he said, oh, mate, you smashed it out of the park. Like, it was amazing. I walked out with Star Wars. It was amazing. He says, the only problem was, my mate says, why did you walk out with Superman? I said, it was Star Wars. I know, mate, he's an idiot. But so I felt really sorry for him. He really pinned on it, and some people didn't recognise the tune. I was like, mate, that was Star Wars. I know it was. It was amazing.
But it says it all about what you said. It all means something different to different people, even the actual title and song.
1,000 Years by Christina Perri was a big popular one. Feel My Love by Adele was a massive one.
Okay, yeah.
Perfect by Ed Sheeran, thinking out loud.
Yeah, that was in my head that it might have been that.
This is wedding music.
Yeah.
But no, not for me.
Has having children changed your musical preference? And am I okay to say having children?
Yeah, but as soon as you said that, my brain went.
I saw your reaction. Yeah,
it's weird.
But I didn't want to say it's having one child.
Absolutely fine. It never. There is no correct answer to that language. It's weird. I think in the recent years, my tastes have changed, but I'm not sure it's connected to having children. So for many, many years, my passion was like discovering what was new in metal all the time. What was the latest release? What was the latest band? Obscure, Czechoslovakian, whatever. Oh, mates, you want to hear this? We've got group chats and have you ever heard this new band? And a few years ago, my brain just started to go, I'm a bit tired with this. Like, there's so much music.
So much.
There's so many bands. I can't keep this going forever. So I just sort of started returning to the old classics and the bands that I'd grown up with, and bands where I have a certain level of deep familiarity, and not just sort of, because I find it now quite almost tiring to listen to something I don't know.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
I just want the comfort of yes, I've heard this Metallica record 5 million times, but isn't it great? There is a Metallica record.
I really relate to that. I wonder if it's like having young children where you're so drained in other areas of your life, you don't have the mental capacity.
I think it started before we had children, but it's certainly since Nola's come along, I was adamant that I was going to educate her in the ways of heavy metal, and because my wife isn't into metal and is into music theatre, I was like, well, she's not turning into a music theatre brat. I'm not having that. So when Nola was 3 days old, I played the first track off the first Black Sabbath album, because it begins with like rain and bells, and I thought she might sort of
sensory.
Sensory kind of thing. And I've got this photo on my phone of her sort of turning around and,
oh,
what is this? So I was like, that's my girl. So now Nola runs around the house shouting "Maiden" at the top of her voice, and I just bought her a Maiden t-shirt, and I take videos of her. She calls the sort of rock sign "rock out."
Aww.
Look, Daddy, I'm doing rock out. Yes, you are.
Amazing.
Good girl.
So cute. And my final question, it's probably a tough question.
Okay.
If you could only listen to one album for the rest of your life, what would it be and why?
I mean, that's crushingly difficult, isn't it? I mean, for many, many years, Dirt by Alice in Chains was my favourite record. And I still would easily have it top 3. But either Somewhere in Time or Seventh Son of a Seventh Son by Iron Maiden now would probably rival it. But yeah, Dirt by Alice in Chains is my teenage years for sure.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you so much for all your amazing answers. We do have our regular questions. So basically on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the worst, 10 being the best, we ask you to rate yourself at the following things.
How awful, right?
Yes. How good looking are you, Mark?
Oh, 4.
How funny are you?
I think that's how I got my wife, 8.
How good at cooking are you?
I'm out of practice because my wife is a complete control freak in the kitchen, so I'm not allowed to make anything because she complains about it. So unknown at this point.
How good at singing are you?
Well, I sing on records, but I'm not sure that makes me an amazing singer because I don't think that's exact science. 7.
Okay. Do you drink much alcohol? And if so, are you good?
I've literally had no drinks for 3 weeks because I thought I was having too many. So right now, none.
It's becoming quite a trend. A lot of people say that. Parenting.
I'm openly not a natural at that.
Yeah.
Angela is the natural. She works in primary schools and like kids just gravitate towards her.
Yeah.
I think I'm better than I was, so 6.
How good a friend are you?
My circle of friends is extremely small. Like I didn't even have a best man at my wedding because I had like no best friend, and would still say I don't really. I have a pool of friends in the bands now. I think I'm a pretty good friend. I'm loyal. I think I really rate loyalty.
Yeah, me
So
too.
8.
How intelligent are you?
I mean, I've been at school about 5 weeks and then put me a year ahead, and I stayed a year ahead for about 6 years. So I guess I'm above average, but I've no idea.
Yeah.
I did a PhD, so I must be all right.
Yeah, definitely. Score. You have to give yourself a score.
Oh,
though.
hell's bells. 8.
Okay. How kind are you?
I think that I come across not as kind as I am in my head because I'm quite impatient. I know that my tone is not always like the kindest, but in my head I'm trying to do the right thing. So like maybe 7.
Brilliant. And you would not like to answer question 10. So that's good.
No, I didn't like that one.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.